The June 28th, 2023 meeting of the San Mateo County Board of Education will come to order. As is our practice, this meeting will be recorded. The board provides remote access for members of the public and welcomes all community members joining in person and remotely. The board is following the requirements of Assembly Bill AB 2449, which enables remote participation by board members only under specific circumstances. We use simultaneous interpretation in Spanish for those attending virtually through the end of public comment. Translation will continue further into the meeting if people are utilizing the channel. Thank you to our interpreter, Teresa Mendeville, for joining us remotely. For meeting attendees wishing to access the Spanish translation channel on Zoom, click on the interpretation button on the menu bar. We ask that all speakers be mindful of the Spanish interpretation and speak slowly and clearly. I ask board members to speak directly into the microphone and remind all speakers who are wearing masks to remove their masks when speaking in order to be clearly heard by all attendees. Item 1B is the approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
There is a motion to approve the agenda made by Mr. Cannon and a second by Ms. Alvaro. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. The motion passes with unanimous vote, and the agenda for tonight's meeting has been approved. Item 2 is public comment. Guidelines for public comment are available on the San Mateo County Office of Education website and in board docs, as well as on the table outside the boardroom in both English and Spanish. If there are speakers who require Spanish interpretation, our interpreter, Ms. Mendeville, will interpret following each speaker's comments. At this time, members of the public may provide comment for topics not included on the approved agenda. The County Board of Education does not act upon any matter that has not been agendized except under limited circumstances as permitted by law. It is the policy of the County Board to refer matters raised in this forum to staff for investigation and/or action where appropriate. Superintendent McGee, do we have any comments submitted prior to the meeting?
We do not.
Thank you. Speakers are invited to make live comment and have 3 minutes to speak. The board's executive assistant, Jennifer Perna, will keep the time and advise when the speaker has 30 seconds left. Please keep within the time limits. To make a comment over Zoom, members of the public may use the raise hand feature. Instructions for using this feature are provided as an attachment in the board packet. Once the hand is raised, please wait to be acknowledged by Superintendent McGee. Superintendent McGee, are there any public attending remotely who wish to comment at this time?
I do not see any hands.
Okay, thank you. Members of the public may also provide live comment in person. Superintendent McGee, are there any cards submitted this evening?
We have no cards.
Public comment addressing specific items will be heard immediately before the board takes them up. If members of the public wish to speak to a specific agenda item, please use the raised hand feature when the item is announced, or if in person, submit a card in advance of the item. Item 3A, is there a motion to approve the minutes of the June 14th, 2023 regular board meeting as presented?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
There is a motion to approve the minutes of the June 14th, 2023 regular board meeting made by Ms. Alvaro and a second by Mr. Cannon. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. The motion passes with unanimous vote, and the minutes of the June 14th, 2023 regular board meeting have been approved. Item 4 is the consent agenda. The consent agenda is not debatable and requires a unanimous vote for passage. An item may be removed from the consent agenda and placed on regular order of business for separate discussion and action if any member of the board, the superintendent, or the public so requests. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
There is a motion to approve the consent agenda made by Ms. Alvaro and a second by Mr. Torres. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. The motion passes with unanimous vote and the consent agenda has been approved. Item 5A. Marco Chavez, Deputy Superintendent, Educational Services Division, will report on the acknowledgement of self-reflection regarding local control and accountability plan, LCAP indicators. Before we begin, are there any comments from the public? Deputy Superintendent Chavez.
Thank you. Good evening, Board President Gerard, members of the board, and Superintendent McGee. This evening, I'm going to provide a report on the self-reflection regarding the local control accountability plan indicators. And this is a requirement by the California Department of Education for all LEAs or local education agencies to report progress on these 10 priority areas. And we use those as guidelines, and they are aligned with standards by the State Board of Education. To meet this accountability requirement, we must do these three steps. One is that we do this self-reflection and we that annually measure progress in meeting the requirements of these specific priority areas. Then we're required to report the results to our board at a regularly scheduled board meeting in conjunction with the adoption of our LCAP, which is what we're doing tonight. And then subsequently, we report the results to the public through the California dashboard. So after this, we will, there's a deadline by which we need to report these to the state. At the April 19th and June 14th board meeting, the LCAP presentations that were presented to you included annual progress in metrics on these priority areas. And tonight I will share the summation of the indicators in order to comply with the state's guidance on reviewing these in conjunction with the approval of our LCAP. So that's the background, and I should have shared this slide, but I just shared that information with you. And so these are this slide here specifically shows the 10 priority areas that we are required to self-reflect and report whether we made how much progress we made in meeting these requirements. The priority 1 is really around the conditions and climate of the school, which includes the assignment of staff, the assignment of teachers, as well as the curriculum that we're using and the facilities as a whole where students come to receive instruction. Priority 2 is around the implementation of the state academic standards. Priority 3 around family engagement. Priority 6, school climate, it really is about how do our students feel? Do they feel connected at our schools? Do they feel that they have that they feel safe in our programs? So we self-reflect on that based on the California Healthy Kids Survey and use that as a measure. Priority 7 is really around the access to broad course of study, and priority 9 and 10 really specifically for county offices of education. we self-reflect on coordination of services for expelled students and coordination of services for foster youth. In this slide here, we're sharing examples of how full implementation, examples of full implementation on these priority areas. The first three bullets are really around parent engagement and how we engage our parents in our student programs. As you've heard from our principal, as well as Associate Superintendent Shows in one of our meetings, that our parents are involved we're very involved in the development of the strategic plan process. They're involved in our school site councils. So we have our parents are engaged in our educational programs. We do provide resources in multiple languages, more specifically in Spanish and English, to provide information to our families. In terms of a positive climate, our students do feel connected to our staff. They do feel safe in our schools. I think an example of that for me was in attending our Gateway graduation, where one of our graduates really shared it. It was a pretty lengthy speech, but it really spoke to very specific examples on how she felt connected to our schools and our programs and our students. In terms of the non-disciplinary based education for expelled youth, we use restorative justice, restorative practices in our programs to teach teach expectations in a positive way with acknowledgements to reinforce that. And in terms of professional development, I believe I read it was about 70% of our staff has engaged in receiving professional development in project-based learning, as well as they received professional development in the implementation and improvement science. And also we've been doing a lot of work, not only within our school programs, but organization-wide in becoming a more anti-racist organization, as well as being mindful of our biases that we bring when we teach and we engage with our colleagues. In terms of engagement with our districts, with our foster youth, we know that our staff is constantly connecting with our districts to improve the experiences of our foster youth within the LAAs that they reside in, as well as opportunities for our foster youth. We know that there was an organized approach to bringing all of our foster youth to a foster youth conference so that they feel connected, they feel part of a community, as well as I believe there was a college fair that was organized specifically for our foster youth, again, with the intent of building increasing opportunities for our foster youth. And at our school, within our school programs, there is this approach to shared leadership where we know that our school administration, along with our staff and parents, through school site councils, have been intentional of engaging a more shared leadership approach to decision making. Now, these are areas or examples where we're, and I believe, well, not I believe, I know that Superintendent Shows did share that there are some areas that we're still continuing to develop, that we're not fully there yet. The first bullet really is around instruction for English learners, that we recently adopted the Study Sync curriculum. And so while we've provided professional development, we have the instructional materials, there's still additional work that needs to happen there to fully implement the program. Similarly, with project-based learning, we have provided there the professional development, but we still need to engage in developing lessons that fully include project-based strategies. And then these next three bullets around career technical education. At the last meeting, you saw how excited Associate Superintendent Shows was in the conversation with you all about the possibilities of fully implementing a career technical education program within our current community school to really give our students the opportunity of that dual enrollment with our colleges, the opportunity of receiving dual credits, and also the opportunity to engage in internships and receive certifications. So, and for that, we need to, again, engage our staff in professional development, engage our students in developing these skills, and provide these pathway opportunities for our students. And then finally, the area that we really are focusing on moving forward is that while we have A through G courses in our programs, they're not fully aligned to the University of California system. So we'll do that work. We'll continue to do that work to align our courses to be UC aligned. And for that, we are still in the process of adopting our science curriculum and social studies curriculum. So that's the progress we've made, and then areas where we still need to continue to work on related to the indicators and the priority areas that I shared. So I'll entertain any questions you may have.
Are there any questions? Doesn't look like there's any questions. Let's see. So I think, Marco, you're on next. And that is item 5B. Marco Chavez, Deputy Superintendent, Educational Services Division, will provide a brief overview of the final 2023-2024 proposed local control and accountability plan prior to the board's discussion and action. Before we begin, are there any comments from the public?
Thank you very much, President Gerard. It seems like it's all things LCAP and budget tonight. So I would like to share that the only change to the plan from when it was presented at the last meeting on June 14th was the narrative in the budget overview for parents section. This was altered to reflect the feedback from the board. And the language that was included is the following. It's on page 3 of 81, where we made that adjustment. It says that most of the 66.6 million is received through local property tax, and unlike school districts, the County Office of Education does not keep the local property taxes received above our calculated funding amount. Thus, SMCOE sends back to the state of California $31 million of excess, in quotes, local property tax. SMCOE's LCFF operating revenue is actually closer to $34 million as a result of this. So that language was added. There was discussion of changing the pie chart at the front page. And unfortunately, because the template is designed a certain way, and we will provide that feedback to CDE, the great suggestion was to develop one for our parents and families. And so thanks to Executive Director Patricia Love and the team, she created this version that's parent-friendly. And it's a draft version, so we wanted to share it with you. It has the budget pie charts that reflect the money that goes back to the state. And then it also has, in simpler language and easier to digest form, our goals, our actions, and successes and needs. So we'll continue to work to refine this document, and we will share it out with you and with our community. So with that, I respectfully will entertain any questions you may have, and request that you approve the SMCOE's 2023-24 proposed local control accountability plan.
Are there any questions? Mr. Camacho.
Thank you so much. I apologize for missing last meeting. This is the final year of this 3-year LCAP, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And then can you just kind of give me an idea, because we keep track of what's happening in year 3, the final year of this plan, while building the next 3-year one, kind of overlapping, right? So you'll be keeping us apprised of progress towards these year 3 outcomes And at the same time, we're developing our 24 through 27
Yes.
plan. It was, I think, just for feedback, I would love to kind of see that timeline overall, because I think engagement was tough when we adopted this longer plan. And so now that we're back in person, we have opportunities to talk more about what our 3-year plan looks like for 24 through 27. I'd love to see kind of where those landmarks are so that we can really have more board engagement in that in terms of student outcomes. And I think those are things we'll discuss just as a board at a retreat or something like that as well. But just kind of keeping us apprised both of the outcomes for this plan and the planning stages that are in effect. Because what I find is coming to the June meetings is when we see the LCAP, because it takes a long time to compile. But I'd love to pull it back so that the board is seeing the development stage of 24 through 27.
Great suggestion. Thank you.
Are there any other Ms. Alvaro?
Thank you. Thank you for this, all of you. Patricia, thank you for this. The wording is good. And I know that the reason I'm bringing this up, because you're going to bring this back, is that it's going to end up in here too. And I'm just wondering if, when we say we're required to send excess quote unquote property taxes back to the state for its use, if we could put in that it's for its use for non-education related purposes. Because damn it, it is. And I think it's really important. I understand we can't change the pie chart, and I appreciate this, but just to say that, look, you're paying your property taxes. We've got this 60 some odd $1 million in your property taxes, of which we're giving half back to the state. And they're not even going to use it for education. So if there's, I know there's formats and there's things that you have to do and can't do. But if anytime that can be inserted, certainly in this, but even in the LCFF that we're looking at right now, that it's getting taken back for use outside of education.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments? Okay, is there a motion to approve San Mateo County Office of Education's 2024 LCAP? Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
There is a motion to approve San Mateo County Office of Education's 2023-2024 LCAP made by Ms. Alvaro and a second by Mr. Cannon. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. The motion passes with unanimous vote, and San Mateo County Office of Education 2023-2024 LCAP has been approved.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Item 6A. Joy Dardanelle, Executive Director, District Improvement and Support, and Wendy Richards, Executive Director, District Business and Support Services, will provide a report regarding annual LCAP support for districts. Before we begin, are there any comments from the public? Okay. Thank you. Executive Directors Dardanelle and Richard.
Good evening. This report is really looking ahead at the 23-24 year. During this presentation, I'm not going to read the report for you. You have it. We will be highlighting some of the learnings and observations we had this year that inform the 23-24 plan. This plan has 3 major parts to it. The LCAP support that we provide, technical assistance, including differentiated assistance, and support for continuous improvement for all districts. We'll be starting today with our LCAP support for our districts. And with that, I'm going to turn it to my colleague and collaborator, Wendy Richard.
Good evening. So we're talking about the 23-24 LCAP that all the districts will be adopting by June 30th. And The collaboration, the intent of the LCAP by the legislature was for the educational side and the business side to be able to collaborate to fully show what is going on and how we're spending our funds to fully meet the needs of our students. And one of the things that we've done here at the COE in order for that to happen is we've really had some good conversations, collaborations through Zoom with our colleagues and out in the field in the districts. And we help them bring together their ed services side with their businesses side because you can't have either one of those, whether the LCAP or the budget, without having both sides at the table and truly looking at all of the information that is gathered from all the stakeholders and all of the information gathered by the business, putting all those dollars and figures together. So we had a lot of conversations, really good conversations. Some of our districts, they only need a little bit of assistance when it comes to creating the LCAP and putting in the numbers. And other districts need a little bit more. And it could be because of many different factors. One of them being there's a change in leadership, both in the ed services side or in the business side. And sometimes you get brand new people who haven't ever put any of these documents together and they need assistance. And that's what we've been here for. And the collaboration that has been going on between our ed services and our business department has just grown stronger throughout the years. This is the final year of this 3-year LCAP season, basically, and we're looking forward to the new one coming up. I know that we're talking about the 23-24, which we've all done already. And but we've got lots of challenges and opportunities that will be coming forward. And we are going to give that assistance to our colleagues out there who are creating these documents. And it does really take a village. We really like the fact that not only do we have your curriculum and instructional side of the house, you've got your special education coming into the mix. And it's really good to see all of those individuals together in one place. And we really appreciate having it done by Zoom because it allows us to have all those different people meet together to look over this. So those are the kind of things that we did this year in helping the districts create the 23-24 LCAP. Joy?
Thank you.
Thank you.
One of the other things that we did in our many meetings with our district partners is that we actually utilized the meetings that we had with each of them. We're a very lucky team because we get to meet with each district leadership team. It's a rare gift to be able to do that. And in these meetings, we actually ask them, what else can we do for them? What do you want to tell us about your district? And some of the things that we learned in those meetings, aside from just helping them with the technical assistance of LCAPs, was that they were struggling with staffing. Some of this was occurring with the new legislations with nutrition. The expanded learning opportunities program is a gift, it's money, and it's also hard to implement because it's difficult to find the staffing at the ratios that they're given with the money that they're given. We also heard that districts are really working on strategic plans similar to SMCOE as they kind of are rolling out of the pandemic. They're thinking long-term and figuring out how do we bring together our strategic plan with our local control accountability plan moving into the future. Science of reading was a topic that we also heard. And then the interest in different wellness programs across the districts. So as Executive Director Richard had mentioned, we deeply collaborated with each other, and that collaboration we definitely saw also mirrored with our district partners as they brought multiple departments into the room in these conversations. Next year, we plan to continue that. We plan to continue our listening campaign alongside our LCAP support, and we'll continue to do virtual meetings because we heard that our district partners felt that was an effective way to get everybody in the room when we had so many people across so many departments coming in at the same meetings. Our second goal is really looking at technical assistance, and that includes differentiated assistance. This year, we provided levels of support for our first year differentiated assistance districts, or districts identified for differentiated assistance, as well as those who are in their second, third, or fourth years. Some were returning as first year districts with new different identifications, and so started the root cause analysis process. As we presented at an earlier presentation this year, chronic absenteeism was a concern across the majority of districts that were identified. Because of that, we wanted to create actually a chronic absenteeism series for our districts, and that was open to our differentiated assistance, districts that were identified for differentiated assistance, as well as other districts that were interested in tackling chronic absenteeism. It was a well-attended workshop. There was actually a series of them, and we heard that it's something that our partners really want to continue into next year. For that reason, we're going to continue our cross-department collaborations and give additional opportunities for our district partners to collaborate with each other as they solve the big problems that they're all facing together. We also are looking at not only chronic absenteeism, but a second area that was identified, which is suspension, especially suspension for African-American students, as an area that we can consider possibly doing a similar series, bringing districts together. And we have heard interest in that type of work for the following year. Our third goal is looking at continuous improvement, not only for the local control accountability plan or differentiated assistance, but really for all districts. And this year, as I mentioned, we did the chronic absenteeism series that was open to all districts. We also had a large group of participants from SMCUE across the departments attending the Carnegie Improvement Summit. And it was an opportunity where student service representatives from student services, the Teacher Administrator Development Program, the Center for Learning Analytics Curriculum, and the District Improvement and Supports Department were able to really think deeply together about developing common language around continuous improvement, as well as how are we really going to meet this need that we're hearing, that districts don't just want to do this in isolation, but together. So we attended a pre-conference session that really focused on how we develop learning hubs around continuous improvement. And we're continuing to have conversations about how we can do that to support the work that we've already started. So next year, we're looking at continued collaboration, continuing our focus on chronic absenteeism, as well as looking at possibilities of how we expand that work into also considering how we address suspension for African-American students and all students. But I can share that in the 4 years as the head of the Systems for District Improvement Department, there's been a huge shift from compliance to really delving into compassionate conversations through the work that we're doing. And those continued conversations from year after year, I feel have given us an opportunity, a unique opportunity to sit side by side with district leaders in the work that they're doing so that we aren't just seeing the LCAP in June, but rather sitting with them through multiple cycles of continuous improvement before they get to that final approval. Thank you. Any questions?
Are there any questions? Mr. Cannon?
Well, just a comment to thank you for your work. I mean, in reading our own LCAP this week, I was impressed by the comprehensiveness of the plan. And of course, that's what's being demanded of us, isn't it? And so that when I reflect on the educators in the county and how complex their jobs are, I just thank you for staying with it and for working with these people and assisting them. I had a kind of a question about, you're working mostly with certificated staff on educational plans. Now, when you work, are you then helping them with their financial aspect of all of this?
So one of the things that we do on the educational support services side is that we help with the program side, but we are very quick to call Wendy and her team. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Wendy to talk about how we also support as SMSUE, the classified side.
Yes, typically it is classified staff that are in the business department. And we do work with them because they are developing the budget. And they have to understand their budget just as SMCOE would understand theirs, of where they're spending their funds and how they're spending it. And because of the local control funding formula, where it delineates what we have as far as our supplemental and concentration grants, we have to help guide because sometimes the educational side doesn't know exactly what that means and how it is actually funded. So we're there, we're supporting them. We also have the compliant issue where we have to make sure that the LEAs are meeting their MPP percentages. And especially now with the fact that in the LCAP, if you notice, there are components that if you have not spent all of your LCFF funds, and in this regard, they're talking about the supplemental and concentration funds. If you haven't spent all of those, that helps make up the MPP. We work with the districts for them to look at all of their spending habits and make sure with the curriculum side, ed services side, that they are truly funding that for those students. We strive very hard to work with them, and that's one of the 4 criteria. If they don't meet their MPP, they cannot get an approved LCAP. So yes, most of those individuals are classified individuals, but there are some certificated CBOs out there also. Does that answer your question, sir?
It does. Thank you very much. How do small school districts get this done?
Sometimes very difficult. But as a former CBO that has been in a couple of small districts, it's really a collaboration between your ed services side and that business side, because both have to have the information from both sides in order to get it done. And sometimes it is just late hours and getting the assistance from the COE to help with suggestions, identifications, definitions, so that they can actually come together.
I just want to also add, in terms of for small school districts on the program side, one of the benefits of having a case management structure where we work with specific districts, each of us, we get to know the leaders very well. They know the superintendents of the small school districts very well. And we work with them on their timeline. There are many things that happen that derail timelines personally, professionally, politically, and we will work with them when they're available. So if it's on the weekend, sometimes we get calls on the weekend. If we said something was due on this day and they say something really horrible happened, I need to give it to you in 2 weeks. Can you speed up your review so that I could give it to you later? We say yes. And we have a team that is really willing to cover however we need to so that we can support them with the greatest amount of flexibility that we can.
Well, I really admire your work. I just remember, being in a school and being in a district office and sort of the outsiders, the county people or the state people would come in and, to establish a working relationship with them was a real challenge. So I thank you for that, for doing that.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments? Mr. Camacho?
I apologize for the very basic question, and I should have known this because it's been 10 years now. Every school district is on the same 3-year cycle in California.
Yes.
So the only person that's or the only group that would be on an off cycle would maybe be a charter school that started midway through-ish.
Everyone's on the same cycle.
That doesn't seem very efficient. I wonder
Yeah.
if they thought about that. Okay. Thank you.
Are there, Mr. Benini?
Oh, I just wanted to thank you for the example of some of the work and the collaboration that you're doing with the districts, and specifically the potential workshops around suspensions. And just my understanding from talking to other boards that some of them have been doing work on looking at the demographics and the disproportionate percentages, not necessarily in the official like disproportionality under special education, but high percentages for students with disabilities and also different other demographics. And so I'm curious if that work in looking just at suspensions might be probably as broader in terms of looking at different types of suspensions, like in school suspensions and other disciplinary practices that are sort of feeding our school to prison pipeline, or however we might describe that. It is definitely on the top of my interest list. So I'm asking it as a.
Thank you for your question. Real true story. I had somebody on my team come in and she says, in-house suspensions, are they absences? Are they suspensions? So I said, this is what I think, but why don't you go talk to Jared Prolo and just double check with what he says. We may want to check with Danya to check on how it's actually registered in CalPADS and how the CalPADS reporting actually does that. So we get those questions because we are digging deep into the data with districts and they want to know those types of things too. And so I think that we have, number one, a richness in the resources we have within SMCOE to quickly call people. I know the names, I know their phone numbers, to get to them as quickly as possible so that there's less of a lag when we want to respond to districts. You had mentioned disproportionality. We don't have our SELPA team here with us presenting, but we also work closely with SELPA. They attend all of our initial meetings and our feedback meetings for LCAP, and it gives us a lot of opportunities to also piggyback on some of their observations so that they can also reiterate some of the work that they're doing with districts.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments? Thank you so much for your report.
Thank you.
Excellent, very informative, and thank you for all you do. We know you all work hard, so thank you. Item 7B, Kevin Baltima, Deputy Superintendent, Business Services Division, is present to answer questions regarding San Mateo County Office of Education's 2023-2024 proposed budget. Before we begin, are there any comments from the public? Deputy Superintendent Baltima.
Good evening, Board President Gerard, members of the board, Superintendent McGee. At our board meeting held on June 14th, we did a detailed budget presentation on the SMCOE 23-24 budget. We held a public hearing in compliance with Education Code. The budget was presented in conjunction with the LCAP. There have been no changes in the budget since we presented it at the last board meeting. And we're here at this time to ask for approval of the 2023-24 SMCOE budget.
Okay, are there any questions? Okay, Ms. Panini?
I have some questions. I actually have some comments to make about the budget. So I find I want to just preface this with there have been a lot of conversations that have gone on about the budget. And this is more me directing this to the board since February. And a number of topics have been, number of questions have been posed in regard to the February 15th meeting that we addressed some issues around conflicts. And we've done a number of things. We've passed some policies. We've gone through that whole process. And it is a very important thing that the budget get passed. So I don't want to discount that. I asked a couple of weeks ago for the memo that we received a couple of years ago to be recirculated mostly for the benefit of trustee Torres, because he hadn't seen that memo and the responsibility that it is for the board to approve the budget. There were a couple of things in that memo that pointed out issues that would be potential reasons why we might pause. And one statement had to do with, you know, it shouldn't be something that is just a small disagreement about the budget, and also shouldn't be a surprise. And what I will say is that the issues that I have with the budget have to do with the conflict of interest issue. I've raised them repeatedly. I've raised them in private meetings with staff. I've raised them by emails. I've submitted questions. And I do think that there have been some concessions made in terms of what is currently in the budget or proposed to be spent during the next fiscal year. But I am not yet satisfied with that, because there are still things that are remaining, small or not, that have to do with the conflict. And so I'm, I guess, asking the board if you agree that that pending conflict is still an issue. I did not feel comfortable after the fact, knowing that I had approved budget items 2 years ago that had to do with this issue without knowing about it. And I don't feel comfortable doing it now. And I didn't feel comfortable doing it last June. So there are a few remaining items that are still planned to be spent in the budget that I object to. And there have been opportunities for those to be removed, but they have not been. And so I'm I guess interested to know if the board has any thoughts on that, if anybody agrees that that is not a small disagreement. And whether or not, you know, we might ask for that at this meeting, or, you know, my position is I have a fiduciary duty to approve a budget that I feel comfortable with, and I do not right now. And so I'll leave it at that. And, you know, ask if anybody has any questions. I'm happy to discuss it further with the board if there are any thoughts.
Are there any other questions or comments that any of the board members do have? Mr. Camacho?
Thank you for that, and for continuing to raise questions about how the conversation around conflict of interest intersects with the conversation around budget. I think it's really important, and I agree with you about our responsibility as a board to be comfortable. It's even beyond comfortable, right? Because it's an official instrument and it represents something. I too have asked questions directly for Superintendent McGee to address around that. And I think for me, coming into the budget conversation, there were questions around conflict of interest. And there were concessions that were made around how to adjust the budgets to reflect those outstanding investigations underway. And for my part, when I think about my role as a board member, if that was the area that I was most uncomfortable with and the current investigation that's underway, or should I say budget items related to a specific individual that is part of the investigation process were removed from this budget, it put me in a position to really think about what are the criteria under which I would vote to not approve a budget. And I think that where I've landed is my question was around how a budget would continue to fund a current investigation underway. That was removed. And so I'm having, well, like I might not agree entirely with how the rest of the dollars are spent. There are some things I do agree with, some things I don't agree with. The conflict of interest was my main concern, and that was addressed, in my view, to a satisfactory point. And so that's why I combining it with the memo that received years ago, I'm like, does this now, with those concessions being made, rise to that level? I'm not sure anymore. And so I'm also curious about what other board members think, because I think it's important for us to have an open conversation about it. And we don't really have that opportunity as a board except through open conversation. So I'm curious about other people's thoughts as well. That's where I'm at now.
Are there any other comments or questions that any of the board members have? Okay, well, seeing none then, I am going to call for a motion to approve the San Mateo County Office of Education's 2023-2024 budget. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
There is a motion to approve San Mateo County Office of Education's 2023-2024 board budget made by Mr. Cannon and a second by Ms. Alvaro. Is there any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no.
No.
The motion passes with a vote of 5 ayes and 1 no. And the San Mateo County Office of Education's 2023-2024 budget has been approved. Thank you. Item 7B. Kevin Baltima, Deputy Superintendent, Business Services Division, will provide an update on the California State budget for 2023. Before we begin, are there any comments from the public? Deputy Superintendent Baltima.
Certainly, I'll be brief. It looks like we do have a budget deal at the state level. Yesterday, June 27th, the governor signed Senate Bill 101, which will be known as the Budget Act for 2023. The legislature also passed Senate Bill 114, which was the Educational Omnibus Trailer Bill, and Senate Bill 115 as it relates to changes in Proposition 28, which is the arts and music funding. So good news, the cost of living adjustment is maintained at the 8.22%. The biggest change is related to one-time money. We were really looking at a kind of almost a clawback of over $2 billion related to the arts and music and instructional materials block grant, and also the learning. Thank you, that one. Those dollars as well. And fortunately, that was pushed back quite a bit. So we're not going to see that take back of large dollars. We're actually looking at less than $200 million less in one-time funding in those two pots of dollars. So we think that's a good thing. There is some shifting of money that was supposed to come to us from the current year that's projected to go out in future years. One of those is related to the zero emissions school bus initiative. Those dollars are pushed out into the 24-25 and the 25-26 school year. There's also changes in the expanded learning opportunity program. Those dollars are also being pushed out to expenditures related to those programs out to the June 30th of 2024. Good news also for county offices of ed is the funding for court schools, juvenile court and alternative school settings maintained and was included in the bill. So not much change from what we've seen before, and will ultimately help, I think, education agencies across the county with really not as large of a take back of one-time dollars as we were expecting.
Are there any questions? Mr. Camacho.
Thank you for that report. It's very helpful. One thing I would say is I'm thankful to CSBA, to CCBE, to the California County Superintendents, to AXA for their continued advocacy. And it was a lot of calls, a lot of engagement to be able to keep us afloat for a year. And I think as we think about how we language or how we speak about this approval, which was necessary to keep us really moving forward, but add the and in 24-25 is a very scary time for schools. And so I think as we're talking with constituents and just the general public about how glad we are that our advocacy efforts helped us make it through 23-24, there's a very scary thing happening that following year. So I would just ask our board members as we engage with the public to remind them that there's still some very shaky water. I don't know, what do you call it? Rough waters ahead, shaky ground, rough water their head, everything, because a public narrative usually attaches on education's funded. And it's like, education's funded for now because we worked hard at that. And now what's next? The other thing I would just like to share with the board members, if you didn't read it in the CSBA action alert around, or wasn't an action alert, but a CSBA notice around budget, and I hadn't realized this. I remember voting for a ballot initiative. Actually, to be honest, I can't remember if I voted for or against it, but I remember a ballot initiative in maybe it was 2018 or 16 that the legislature could not pay itself unless the budget was approved in time. Because of a CSBA notice, I noticed that what they do is they pass a budget to buy themselves more time to be able to continue to be paid. That is very much against the spirit of that proposition. And I just thought I would share it with you all that I noticed that, and I hadn't known that before. It's a little sneaky, so, but thank you for the report.
Well, you did remind me, I should point out that the revised estimates of revenue do look like they are solid projections. So we're actually seeing revenues come in at the expected pace related to the May revise. But as you pointed out, the unknown is fairly large in that we really aren't going to know our tax receipts until October because of everybody not having to pay their taxes until October. So it's just one thing to keep in mind. It looks like our projections are better, but it speaks to the uncertainty.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? Thank you very much. Appreciate the update very much. Thank you. Item 8B, the public hearing of the initial proposal of the
Oh.
San Mateo County.
President Jarrett,
Oh, yes.
sorry, we missed 8A
Oh.
back on the previous page.
Oh, a third one. I saw Kevin and I thought I was done. Okay. Item 8A, Kevin Baltima, Deputy Superintendent, Business Services Division, and Armando Sanchez, Executive Director, Housing and Endowment and Regional Trust, HART, who is joining us remotely, will provide a report on workforce housing. Before we begin, are there any comments from the public? Okay. Deputy Superintendent Baltimore?
Thank you. I'll jump into the presentation if we pull that up. And Armando will be available to make sure I get things right. I will say HART just stands for Housing Endowment and Regional Trust. You may be more aware of it than I have been, but it is a joint powers authority and a 501c3 corporation. So walking through, this is really an opportunity to address affordable housing and specifically for us related to educators. We know living in this area that certainly housing affordability is a challenge, certainly true for an education. I'm not going to read every bullet point here. I think you're aware of this. Projected growth in rents, we know it's going to go up. It's going to go up over time. And other than the blip that we saw during the pandemic, no expectation that it's going to be anything different than increases year over year. And we look at the challenges, there's quite a few of them. One is just the long timeline it takes to get a project going. The financing can be complex. And in our case, we don't even have access to voter approved debt. Districts lack experience in this area. This isn't really what we do on a normal basis. And then there can be opposition on new development. Additional challenges, lack of land. Small districts really have more of a challenge, even though they have the same challenges. There's some hesitancy possibly to have employees living with each other, not only at work, but then that's who they're spending their time in their personal time. And then it's difficult working with the state legislature to get assistance in some of this area locally. So HART has a solution that they brought forward. One is this is really about purchasing an existing apartment building. And they would do that through HART's bonding capacity. As a JPA, they have the ability to issue bonds, 30, 35-year bonds. The housing, if it's bought, would be more readily available because it's not a new development that takes the same amount of time. And what you really see is when you buy a building and you do it through a financing through a bond and it's a tax exempt bond, you see additional savings that can be used that will only grow over time. So Hart would be specifically responsible for acquiring a building. They would be responsible for the process. They would be responsible for securing the financing. They would be managing the property. And then they would be required to report those benefits to San Mateo County Office of Ed. And the benefits to us not doing this directly, we are not directly involved in the property management, which again goes back to it's not in kind of our wheelhouse. It's not what we normally do on a regular basis. We wouldn't have any capital investment on our end. Really very little risk. I keep asking the question, where's the risk in this? And I just haven't found any yet. There's no development risk. When you get into construction, I have to admit, I've been challenged in some of the construction projects here with timelines and budgets. So we wouldn't be involved in that. And we're not using our staff to do this kind of work. So I think one of the reasons that SMCOE has been approached for this is that we really can help with education countywide. We have a countywide approach. We have relationships with our local LEAs. We can help Hart with basically understanding the size and location of a potential building. We can work with them to direct the affordability as we start seeing those savings over time of how we would structure rents within the building itself. We can work with districts if they're having problems with staff finding housing. We can be the conduit to kind of point them in that direction. And then we certainly have a balance here with certificated staff. We always talk a lot about teachers, but it's our classified and support staff as well that have the same challenge. And again, this could also be done for teachers across the county. So if they're moving from one district to another, this opportunity would still be available to them. So Hart's team is really Hart themselves, but then Manit Housing Solutions would be helping them with their asset management. And then RBC, Royal Bank of Canada, would be involved in the capital marketing and the bond sale itself. They would be underwriting the bonds in essence. So when you're looking at a building that's going to be used for housing, these are some of the amenities they look for. They've done this before, looking at fitness centers, clubhouse, roof terraces, things that would really would entice somebody to want to live there. They'd be looking at central heat and air, in-unit washer and dryers, stainless steel appliances, walk-in closets. These again are some of the things that make it appealing to staff. And then getting into the affordability issue, kind of year one right away, because we're selling tax exempt bonds again. And that we'll talk a little bit about the tax issue, but there's really savings that's generated from day one. But it should also be clear, this really isn't low income housing. This is a more affordable housing with hopes over time as those difference between the bond payments and then what we're paying for rent or paying on the bonds themselves increases. It gives us more dollars to use to offset rents and offer different variations of charges. We can also stabilize, so we're not looking at the market rates that can jump at higher rates. We can really maintain more flat, more stable rent increases over time. And then I think one of the interesting parts for us is that we would potentially receive the asset at the end of the debt service. So at the end of 30, 35 years, ownership would revert to SMCOE. So there's just two slides here to kind of show just examples of different makeups of how the rents could be organized. And this is also showing how that benefit increases a bit over time. And again, just the same analysis, but looking at maybe a different way to structure those that benefits different peoples and different income levels. So ultimately, here's the one challenge, the cost of this is related to the loss in tax revenue for our local education agencies. Because this is a exempt property, they would not be paying property taxes. So that certainly has a direct impact for LEAs that are basic aid, community funded. The impact isn't as much if you're traditionally local control funding formula, but it is still money that isn't going to LEAs directly. Now, just to put this in some perspective, the way the county property taxes work, right? It's county-wide property taxes that are distributed based on the old AB 8 factors. So it's not like if a property was built in a specific district, they would lose out on all that revenue. What ultimately happens is it's less property tax revenue countywide, and then it gets distributed based on those historical factors since Prop 13. So it doesn't have quite the impact like on a specific district. The good news is it spreads that pain out a bit, but it also impacts all LEAs to some extent. So, and the other thing to keep in mind is just the scope of this. If we're talking about in this example, $700,000, almost $800,000, we still have, if you look at county-wide property taxes, we're in the $2.7 billion mark. So you start getting into 0.00%. So don't get me wrong, it's real money, but the impact to a specific district won't be as dramatic as you might see if it was specifically one boundary. So this slide is attempted to show just the benefit again over time. And the largest blue there is really the valuation of property itself. So taking an example of a property, in this example, I think it's 12. Well, I forget the initial amount, but it's really talking about the increase in that assessed valuation over time. So next steps for us, we look at a pre-project selection where we approve the principles, the criteria, conditions for property selection, and approve the residual benefit agreement. That's where basically they're conveying the property post bond repayment to us. And there's certainly some things we need to work through there, make sure that SMCO is protected. And then project selection, properties need to be selected based on the criteria that we work through. The HART team goes through the detail, the financials and benefits to SMCOE, and then administration consents to the specific purchase of the property. And then HART would execute the bonds and then purchase the building. So that's the summary view. I'll try and answer any questions, and certainly Armando with HART is here to help as well.
Mr. Cannon?
Does the state provide encouragement for these projects?
I'm not aware of any state activity that would be involved with this. Armando might be aware, but this would be really a local solution.
And are we,
That is correct.
what did he say?
He said that's correct.
Oh, so are we far enough along in this ourselves to say our goal is to have housing for 5%, 15% of our staff?
I don't think it's probably premature to talk
Yeah,
about percentage
I
of
get it.
staff that
I
we
get
would be able to house, because I think, again, this is a county-wide solution. So you're looking at maybe an apartment building with 100 units or so. So just think about that. That's not going to cover and make a huge dent in this issue, but it's a solution and kind of starts the ball rolling.
Well, when you think about what Jefferson Union High School District has reported, it's a huge benefit to their people.
Absolutely. Retaining and recruiting quality staff, housing's an issue.
Ms. Alvaro?
Thank you for this presentation. I have a couple questions. There's a slide, I think it might be slide 7. It was on my copy. And there's a little blue area and it mentions the percentage for public units. And my question is, why are there units available to the public if this is a project being done for teachers and staff? I mean,
May I answer that question?
yes, please.
Okay. Well, first, good evening, Board President Gerard, all board members, and Superintendent McGee. Thank you very much for considering this. I am in another country right now, so it's like 5 in the morning for me. So I apologize if I'm not as clear as I would normally be if I was present at this time. The reason there are some public units is that several years ago, cities and the county started requiring developers of market rate housing to include public affordable units. And there are strict agreements recorded against the properties that require these to continue to exist. So if we were to acquire a building for the Office of Education to house teachers across the county, we would still be responsible for maintaining those public affordable buildings in the project. That is the reason why those are there, and those would have to continue pursuant to the agreements when the developers built those apartment buildings.
Okay, thank you. It sounds like a bit of a, not on your part, but on the part of the regulation, it sounds like a bit of a circular argument, because we're, looking to build stuff for public employees, but there still have to be public units in the public employee. I'll let that go, but thank you for answering that. So I had two other questions. Mr. Baldomer, you said when the impact, the property tax loss impact would be county on a countywide basis, meaning this office, but not local districts. Now, how does that work? Let's say the building is in downtown San Mateo. How does San Mateo Foster City and San Mateo Union High School District not get impacted by that coming off the property rules?
Well, maybe I didn't say that clearly. All LEAs would be losing out on these dollars based on those AB8 factors. But it's spread out across all districts, including San Mateo County Office of Ed. It doesn't impact us because we send money back to the state.
Right.
If you're a local control funding formula district, it just fills up your pot a little bit more and there's less state money. But if you're basic aid, if you're community funded, it's dollar for dollar loss.
So again, okay, I think I misunderstood what you said, and thank you for the clarification, but how does that work? If it's in X city, if it's in downtown Redwood City, how does the impact to the Redwood City Elementary District not be more than to other districts in the county?
Yeah, that's kind of, I'm learning this as I go to coming into San Mateo County Office of Ed. But property taxes aren't distributed within a specific boundary. Basically, property taxes are collected countywide, not only residential, but commercial property. That total amount is then distributed based on historical factors going back to Prop 13, AB8 factors. So if you look at like working with the county controller's office, they'll point districts to look at their tracker basically of what their local property taxes are doing, but that's not really the amount of money in property taxes that they receive. It's a countywide pool, and then it's distributed based on a historical factor, and those will change slightly over time. So what you're seeing right now is Belmont, for example, is getting benefit from a commercial property being developed in South San Francisco. And I don't think that's readily understood because we think in terms of boundaries.
Yeah.
And
I know, for instance, La Junta Pescadero historically has had a real problem with property coming off the tax rolls, like farm property, for instance, coming off the tax rolls and going into nonprofit sector, like Post, for instance, buying it. All of a sudden, La Junta Pescadero Unified is not getting the property tax, and that's directly impacting their income. But I never heard that that was also impacting San Carlos and South San Francisco. Am I misunderstanding that all this time?
we can certainly double check to make sure that I have it correct. Because I was under the understanding you when I first came here.
Yeah.
But as I've worked more closely with the controller, I've learned that it's actually a county-wide property tax that's distributed on these prior factors. So
Right.
I don't know if it's specific to farm property. We need to do that research a bit to see how that may impact it different.
We could certainly, if you wanted, do some research on kind of the impact of particular properties coming off the roll and provide something in writing to the superintendent to share with the board.
Yeah, I think Armando's team already provided a projection of what a building might look like.
Well, and I saw that slide.
But this was
I'm so
information he
confused.
provided to us this week, just some numbers. Armando, I don't know if you want to speak to this.
Yeah, thank you, Superintendent. So the answer to the question really is that while every taxing agency is affected, you are correct, board member, in the presumption that the city or the district that serves the city upon which the project is housed is going to bear the greatest impact of it. While other districts may bear some impact, it's going to be minuscule. The vast majority. So your understanding is actually quite on that it would be. And just for your information, most of the buildings that really are available in this market tend to be concentrated in certain cities within the county, such as Redwood City, San Mateo, Foster City, South San Francisco. Those are probably the most, have the most buildings that would be ideal targets to acquire for such a project. There are some in other cities, but most of them are there. And fortunately, as it is with most of the county, and probably excluding the coastal cities, there is a lot of development. So, we're not talking about taking 20, 30 buildings off the tax rolls. One building, well, as the deputy superintendent clearly stated, it is real money being taken away, but it is a small percentage of the budget, and growth in the county should, for the most part, replace those funds in a fairly quick manner.
Right, thank you. I just foresee a political football that looks a lot like NIMBYism, right? So don't build that project in my city because we're going to lose the property taxes. Build it in their city. They have nice buildings over there. And I think it's going to be a fair, question. It's going to be a fair discussion, and it would be just something to definitely have in mind.
And I think we have a good relationship with the controller's office. We could actually then, if a specific property was identified, we could run the analysis to see what that impact would be for all LEAs.
Okay, thank you. And then I just had one last question, which is, and I saw the charts that were explaining that, over time, when the rents got to a certain point, we would own the building. The bond would basically be paid off. So then once we own the building, it's ours when we run it, and we have to hire people to run the building, and that becomes a whole new side branch for us.
It's an asset for SMCOE. The organization could sell it, continue to management, whatever the board at the time and elected superintendent felt like they wanted to do.
But until then, it's run by the nonprofit.
It is run by HART for the benefit of housing employees of the school districts.
Okay, but once the building becomes the county offices, then it becomes our responsibility to do the management part of it. We become landlords.
If you think about the Jefferson Union High School District that has just built that property, they have they set up a nonprofit that is supposed to manage the building on their behalf. But as you might have heard, employees are still going to board meetings to ask for rent issues and things like that. So you don't want to set up yourself up like that. And the way it's structured is that you have a choice to decide how the property will continue to be managed for the benefit of school district employees. One option is to take ownership and set up a nonprofit and direct them to run it for you. Another option is to transfer it to someone else who would run it for the benefit of the employees. The board could decide to leave it with HART, again, for the benefit of the employees. And so you'll have options of how to do it to try to keep more at arm's length from, finding yourself in the same situation. But yes, ultimately, whatever benefit is derived, whether it is affordable rents or whether it's surplus revenue coming in, it will go to your office.
Okay, thank you for all your answers. Thank you.
Ms. Benini? Mr. Camacho?
Thank you for updating us on this. I'm like conflicted because I'm trying to respect my decision to not sign up for every committee, but I'm really interested in what you all are talking about. So there's a tension there. So I'm going to separate my comments into the things I'm curious about and the things that I think are really important to this board to understand a little bit further. What I'm curious about is, thank you, Council Niblin for Attorney Niblin for suggesting that you guys could put something together for us, because I'm very curious about how that works, because I like to be able to absorb the story and be able to communicate it back out. So thank you for if y'all can give us more information about how that works. On the curiosity side, I think there's also just a little bit of curiosity around. I know that whenever there are new funding mechanisms for school districts, a lot of those come with restrictions on whether or not they could be used to pay teachers' salaries. And so I'm wondering how do I phrase the question? These would be below market rate units, correct? And so I guess if you own the building, though, you're setting those rates. I have to think about this a lot. That's like, because it's freaking out. I have to really process this one a lot. So then I'll just jump straight. Well, one feedback on one thing that was said was creating like when you get to that level of the principles and what are the guidelines. One thing that was said was if someone moves within the county to another school district, I would just say I don't love that idea. I feel like it would be important for me that someone that's entering housing that's supported by this countywide effort, I would love for them to stay with their district for a term that's agreed upon. Because I know that there's a lot of movement, particularly from North County and the coast side into other higher paying districts within the county, and I don't want to contribute to that. So that's kind of one of the policy pieces I'd love to contribute. I think now from the perspective of what is important for this board to know, one question would be, if we pursued the ownership piece, would that be like other county office properties where it's in joint ownership between the board and the superintendent?
Yes, actually, we've drafted policy 3400 that will be coming before you that will spell that out specifically.
Okay, thank you. And then I think what I want to have a better sense of is what are we considering? And if nothing this evening, or what is this board considering in this process? Like what is being asked of the board in this process? And if nothing tonight, which is probably, this isn't an action item, it's just kind of an update, what do we foresee the timeline? Because I noticed that you mentioned like we have to act as the market is dictating, as a private market is dictating. What do you foresee the timeline looking like and what would be asked of the board along that timeline?
Armando, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah. Oh, okay. So, right now the presentation is really to introduce you into what is being proposed in terms of creating housing for district employees. So the first step in the process would be to enter into a memorandum of understanding with you. That would be the action at the next meeting, basically setting the ground rules of what you would allow, what parameters you would want us to follow in finding a building. Perhaps one of those would be, don't buy any buildings on the coast because those districts will have a more tremendous impact to their budget, even with a small amount of tax loss. So that could be one of them. You could direct us, to buy a south-facing building or something as trivial as that. But whatever is important to you, in the MOU, and we provided a draft of it to your office, and so you could take a look at it. But anything that you may want. So the hope would be that the action at the next board meeting would be for you to adopt the MOU. At that point, you're basically giving us direction of how to find that building. One of the most important aspects from our end is that these properties come up for sale and are sold really fast. And if we were to acquire a building for you for the benefit of district employees, we need to move really fast, which requires a second action from you once we find a building. And that is a very simple action to basically sign an agreement that says that when the bonds are paid off, you will accept ownership of the building. That is all that your board and the superintendent's office have to do. There is no more, negotiations or any other hurdles to go through. You just simply say, okay, Art, when you buy this building, you go ahead and buy this building. It'll serve our employees. And once it's paid off, we'll take ownership of it or direct you on how to have it run for the benefit of district employees in the future. So it's a two-step process. And like I said, one is next one, adopt an MOU, and then down the road, when we find a building, and it will take a little bit of time because the market conditions with the interest rates being high and volatility in the bond market, it won't be super fast to find a building. But as I mentioned, once we do, we would bring the specific building back to you really quick and let you know and have you accept execute the agreement to take ownership, and then we'd move forward.
And then I did speak with Armando about July being a place where not all the board members are here and we might not have enough time to work through all the details. So that I think there's some give there to continue the conversation and work with the subcommittee and look at the MOU and perhaps bring back a draft MOU at a board meeting to talk through, and then perhaps at a subsequent board meeting have added additional details or changed or edited things that the board wants to see in there.
Madam President, I'm sorry, go ahead. I've had a chance to talk with Mr. Sanchez actually about this sort of form of transaction a couple of times. And there was one point I was hoping Mr. Sanchez could touch on because I think it's very relevant and important to the board. And that is kind of the county offices or the board's liability with respect to the bonds. If for whatever reason, for example, you couldn't, it's hard to fathom, but you couldn't sort of make the revenue work, or you couldn't get enough tenants or what have you, and sort of the limits on liability of the board itself. I was hoping you could speak to that.
Yeah, thank you, John. We have worked together on this for a very long time. And one of the things, our board had similar concerns. The Hart board did not want, if, as Mr. Nibbling indicated, if there's some kind of financial default on it, that the board wanted, Hart board wanted to be assured that there was no liability to our other assets in it. So they directed us to hire a law firm. Their name is Kutak Rock. And they did an analysis and basically came back and in pretty clear detail said that there is no recourse beyond foreclosure on the property. So if there were ever any problems, then they couldn't come after Hart's board of directors and our other assets. They couldn't come after the beneficiaries' assets, in this case being the Office of Education. So it is pretty clear that, we can provide this, well, as I said, Attorney Niblin has already seen this document as he participated when we hired Kutak Rock to do it. But I also want to emphasize that, we have done something to improve the process to avoid the possibility of foreclosure. Deals that have been done, throughout the state by other entities where the beneficiaries are the cities, actually, not the school districts. In all of these deals, they, all the bonds are equal. Any of them could conceivably foreclose. We've set up a structure where we have a series of bonds where the junior bonds cannot foreclose on a property so long as the senior bond is being paid. And so it's structured in a way that it becomes, I don't want to say impossible, but extremely difficult to run into a situation where the senior bonds would ever not be paid. So we've taken extra steps to ensure the safety of not only protecting the boards and our assets, but more importantly, also protecting the housing.
Thank you, Armando. Thank you, Madam President.
Ms. Benini.
So I have I just want to clarify a few things that I heard when we had the first presentation, which also had the financial people and Armando and I forget who else was there, but all of us on the committee. One of the things that Trustee Alvaro mentioned around the public units, I was hoping, Armando, that you could explain kind of the way that the gentleman did from the financing, like what does that really look like, and what's the phasing? Because my understanding, and maybe I'll just start and then you can correct it or finish it, but is that when you buy these buildings, they're actually occupied. And so it's a matter of, as people leave, the units open up and then those units become available to the employees of the districts or of the county office. And then there's the level of cost that would be paid for those specific units that I'm going to a second topic, but is whatever would be kind of, yes, hopefully below market, but required to sort of pencil out for the building maintenance and all of that. So in it, that'll be sort of up to the committee, but it'll change over time as there's more equity, right? Where we can be a
Mhm.
little more flexible, which, so there'll be like this phasing in. So it'll be many public units, I think, at the beginning. And then my third point, which I'll just roll in here because it's related to the pricing, is that two things. If the pricing if people are in the units that are employees and that they start making more money, like go to a different district, then their rent would ratchet up. It wouldn't be that would, it potentially, depending on what system we put in place. And also the fact that initially there might not be, and just to manage expectations, that it might not be the pay range of our classified staff for a while, like a while, right? It might just be certificated staff that would qualify or even be able to pay the amount that they would have to pay. That was a lot, but those are all the kind of the issues that got rolled in, and I was like, yeah. So Armando, did I say that right? And do you want to add anything?
Yeah. If I can add a little bit to that, you're correct. These buildings are generally 100% occupied, but these buildings that we are targeting are primarily what are called Class A buildings that are fairly new, probably less than 5 years. And they're very attractive, and the rents tend to be quite high. As a result of that, the turnover in these buildings is tremendous. Some of them experience as much as 50% turnover year to year. People desperate for housing, wealthier people desperate for housing when they come to the county, move into these buildings. They usually get a deal the first year, and then the rent just dramatically spikes on them, and they tend to move out pretty fast into another one. And so there's this constant churn. So I believe that, you're absolutely correct. There is a phasing, but given the level of turnover that happens in this building, it shouldn't be too bad, but it will be phased in. I think your second point was, I'll jump to your third point about affordability. You're absolutely right. I think, as we all know, when you buy a home or when you have something like a new financial responsibility, the first thing to do is to make sure you pay the debt. And the advantages we have here is it's twofold. One, and it's one of the costs of doing it is we don't pay property taxes. So essentially what was paid in property taxes becomes what subsidizes the lowering of the rents, along with several other factors. The other thing that really creates the affordability is, again, I apologize for using this comparison, but it's the easiest one to make. And for people who rent their home and have never owned a property, it's hard for them to see it, but it's like a mortgage. When you first buy your home, you're really stretched trying to pay your mortgage, but as time goes by and your salary increases a little bit, it becomes more and more affordable for you. The same thing happens here. As time goes by, the fixed mortgage we have paying the bonds is fixed, whereas rents and incomes are going up. And this makes it more and more feasible to lower rents more for the benefit of district employees. And eventually, we could find a situation where you could have more classified staff. The third point I think that you mentioned is, yes, the initial, the benefit, the district will tell us how to distribute it. And as I said before, or we've mentioned during the committee, it's up to you to tell us. If we come back and say we have $1 million in rent savings, we are having a difficulty with holding on to classified staff in certain districts, we need to prioritize them. So we would distribute more of the rent savings towards that income level and house those types of tenants, if that is what you direct us to do. If it's more general, more for the teachers that are higher income, we would do that. So it really comes, we, Hart, and our team will not dictate, how the rent benefits are distributed. We will work hand in hand with you to determine what allocation would most benefit employees of school districts in the county. I think I might have missed one point. Remind me.
I think you got it all. Thank you very much. And then I just had one more question actually for Superintendent McGee, because you raised the equity piece and how that might look. So I think that might be important for the board to hear potentially, like we don't, if we were to move forward and addressing the needs of different districts, there's already sort of a structure in place, right?
Yeah, I mean, the way we heard our participation is that we really get to create a foundational philosophy about how we approach who would have access into the building. Certainly, I would advocate for county office employees to have access. But we also have a really powerful equity rubric that we've refined and that we want to bring back to the board to show you how we're using it. It has many layers of formulas inside, and it sort of brings you to sort of rates the districts on if you're high and right, you're in the most vulnerable spot with your resources. And we use the equity rubric quite a bit to determine how we charge districts and who we partner with and who we're supporting. And I would think that the equity rubric could be a really strong tool in setting some criteria for how we approach how we would prioritize applications. I don't know about housing law and all those things, and whether even prioritizing like that is allowed. But I would think it is.
Yeah, I guess it would depend. That's what I would say. But yeah, there are some limits under Prop 209, some other Fair Housing Act and
Right.
things like that. But broadly speaking, we've been thinking really hard at the county about how we integrate equity principles into, how we allocate benefits and what have you. So it's certainly work we'd be excited to do with you.
The one other thing I would add is just that in the property tax conversation, the fact that every district would lose a little bit of revenue. I mean, really, I think a few dollars, on the 20 or something, or the 100, is that every district would ultimately be able to participate in the program also. So they would benefit from it. It might not pay off in spades because there would be limited number of units and they only become available so often, and you probably have waiting lists, but there's also that to consider.
Ms. Vanini?
One other thing about the taxes, I'm pretty sure this, I guess, half question, it would also impact the cities. The cities do get a piece of that as well.
Definitely.
And
Cities
so
county.
even in our first meeting of the committee, we identified like, oh, maybe there's another like political discussion there. So I think we have that on our radar and we just need to maybe see a little bit more of the modeling. And I don't think there are any local cities who have done this. They're in other places. So they haven't had that impact, but I don't know if it would be significant, but it would just be like, maybe a partnership type of discussion, we have the same constituents, same families. So.
And Armando did mention in our first couple of meetings that you can build in also in the criteria contingencies where if you can't fill units with educators, maybe it's city employees that would be the next tier of applicants. Or didn't you say that, Armando?
Yes,
Something to that effect?
that is correct.
Yeah.
So, this is, I'm also involved in helping districts with their construction of their housing. I'm working with this Pacifica School District and, advise some of the others that are also contemplating housing. And the consultant that helped the Jefferson Union District, I spoke with them very frequently. They had questions. So, one of the fallbacks has always been under the construction method or under this method that, the first priority is district employees. And if those are not available to fill the units for, whatever reason, whether the rents are too high for the district employees or other reasons, then the second priority would be given to employees of other public agencies, whether they be city, county, or other types of public employees. Then the general public, then there's nothing, because as we said earlier, or as I said earlier, you know, it is important to keep the units filled to pay the mortgage.
And then one more thing, Armando, that you mentioned that I think is important to say is that in this model, on an annual basis, there would be an income check or something like that, so that if you're no longer working for a school district, not even just moving from district to district, but let's say you leave the profession, then
Yeah.
they would lose the benefit.
Yeah, exactly. You know, when you buy a building with existing tenants, they have you know, a specific set of rights that you have to respect, that, you know, whether they be state or local rights. And you generally, you don't want to displace people. So tenants that exist when you buy a building have more rights, and you wait for them to leave of their own volition. But tenants that come into and we would deed restrict the building with affordability covenants. Tenants that come into a building that is already deed restricted as an affordable housing, they come in with the understanding that it is an affordable unit, it is income-based requirements. And so if you are no longer eligible, then you do have, you know, a certain period of time to move out by. The nice thing about this is, in a way, is that it's tiered units. So, you know, perhaps you have a teacher who comes in and is very low income, and so they occupy one of the lowest tiers of available housing, but then they get a raise and their income goes up. Well, you know, we would reclassify their unit to be a higher income one, and the next vacancy we would bring in a lower income tenant. So you're able to move people up the affordability chain, and you know, unless they were extremely high income, they would not have to move out. But again, this is also criteria that you could direct us. You know, if you don't want the benefit about mobility to be, if you move to a higher paying district, then we can certainly not have that criteria. It really is for you to direct us on how the fairness, the equity, and you know, what makes most sense.
Mr. Camacho?
Since I know that like things may move expeditiously, quickly, without like full opportunity for input. Because like, I mean, I try to check my county office email regularly, but then sometimes there's not very much information and there's a lot of information. So I'm just going to put my considerations out here now so that it goes into the parts for discussion when MOUs and things come into place. One would be, I'm just processing because you just said something that really stood out to me. I just learned that there are some districts in this state that are actually paying their intern teachers a lower pay than a first-year teacher, when the intent of the intern credential program was for them to be earning teacher of record salaries. So I would advocate in any kind of considerations that we're doing that, like, when we know of things like that, that's a really important consideration, because I'm finding more and more people that are entering the profession through alternative pathways are being burned left and right, and they should be prioritized because they are the future of our profession. One of the other things that was important to me was, and I'm going to say this statement, and I know it sounds like really awful and controversial, but like, generally speaking, it has a huge asterisk on it. Generally speaking, I'm opposed to teacher housing and staff housing because I believe that teachers and staff and all school employees should be able to buy homes in every community where they would like to live. So the big asterisk is, I understand that's just not possible, and we're not going to get there anytime soon. So with that, why I support these kinds of projects is because I think that we can still create homes that teachers and school employees are deserving of. And so when we look at these properties, I think it's important that we also consider that we shouldn't have an issue of not enough, we shouldn't have a vacancy issue, because this should be a place that school employees see tremendous value in. These are places that have considered not only their day jobs and salaries, but also their family obligations. So childcare, collaborative spaces, things like this, because I want this to be a place where, since we can't pay teachers and school employees a level in which they can buy a home that makes them feel like this is their home and their place, that we can give them the best possible living experience that's within what we can provide. So I don't want it to be, if we go into this, we're Maslowing this and it's like, here's a house with a roof. And I got the walk-in closets, that's great. All those things are great, but it's more than just your box. It is all those other things that make community, because we're not able to give that to them through their salaries. And so that's definitely a priority for me if we were to enter into this business, is are we looking at it beyond just their box? And what does it mean to give them true community? Because we're already asking so much of them and we're already not giving them what they fully deserve. So thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Alvaro?
Thank you. And I appreciate you putting all that stuff out there, Mr. Camacho. So in that same spirit, yeah, we don't want to create teacher ghettos. This is not a good thing. But giving them a place that's a real home for them and their families, that's a good thing. When we're talking about equity, I do have a couple of concerns. And I have to speak frankly, where I live, for a teacher who teaches down the street from me to think about a building that just got purchased in Daly City is not going to be very interesting unless they look to change jobs. For a teacher who works in La Junta Pescadero, something in South San Francisco is not going to be very attractive unless they change jobs. So I want to be very careful that unless we're just saying we're serving county office people, because we know where we're located, then, or prioritizing county office people, that we have to look at, can we serve people who live in some of the outlying areas without encouraging them to leave the area they're teaching in? Because I know people who have left teaching on the coast because they get a lot more money someplace else, in spite of the fact that the commute is horrible. It was just that much more. But if you make it so the commute is no longer horrible, because they're already living over here, then I don't want to be part of creating an exodus from some of the smaller rural districts that are already really badly impacted by that sort of, they're paying more money over the hill. So I don't know how to fix it. I just put out the concern.
Are there any other comments? Mr. Torres?
Yes, I just want to talk about it from my professional experience with my previous organization where we would purchase properties. So this is in regards to the public having being able to live in the units. We would purchase properties that were already full, and then we would send out letters to each of the tenants letting them know, hey, we purchased this property, this is what it's for. And within maybe 5 or 6 months, turnover rate was huge. Like we got 90% of the people that we wanted in there, and the people that didn't want to live there had the opportunity to stay or leave, and a lot of them chose to opt out. And also, all of your feedback and comments are very helpful. Since we haven't really established the criteria yet, it's great to have all of that information so that way we present something that meets everyone's needs.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Superintendent McGee?
Just one final, just want to thank Armando and your partners, Mark Wiesenthal and Ian Parker, who are here attending the meeting, listening to the conversation. They've been really supportive and instructive and patient with the process. And I really appreciate, Armando, your expertise and in this. And then I also just want to say that we obviously know that this is just one thing that we can do, that it's really in the big challenge of housing in this county. It's not going to solve that, but it is action that we can take that does make a difference for those people who get to live in this building. And that is worth considering. So I just want to thank you again, Armando, and thank you, Deputy Superintendent Boltema, for your presentation and support.
I
Thank you,
also
board
want to
members.
thank you, Mr. Sanchez, for being up in the middle of the night, if I'm understanding right, wherever you are. So thank you so much for giving us your time and your sleep. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. Item 8B, the public hearing on the initial proposal from the San Mateo County Educators Association, SMCEA, to the San Mateo County Superintendent of Schools with the 2023-2024 school year is now open. Would anyone like to speak on this issue? The hearing is now closed. Item 8C, the public hearing on the initial proposal from the San Mateo County Superintendent of Schools to the San Mateo County Educators Association for the 2023-2024 reopener bargaining agreement is now open. Would anyone like to speak on this issue? The hearing is now closed. Item 8D is superintendent's comments. Superintendent McGee, do you have any comments this evening?
I have a few brief comments. One is that I sent a lengthy update to the board today. One of those items was about the logistics for the court school graduation on Friday. Nearly as soon as I hit send, I got an email from Shelley Johnson that probation has changed the location because they're doing slow burning up on the hill on Friday and they don't want the kids outside. So they're going to move it back to Hillcrest. And so I will send you tomorrow the location where everyone should meet, a description of how you're going to get into the facility, because I'm not sure if you're going to go through the front or the back, and all the things that you would need to know in order to make that a smooth process. But the information I shared today about Camp Kemp is no longer valid. So I apologize.
Just one comment. It did say on the flyer that the graduation was January 30th.
Yeah, I know. I did see that also. And you just, love the effort, but sometimes those kind of things get missed. So last week I was in San Diego, as I think I had shared with the board before, with we were a team of 13 at the California Labor Management Institute. This organization is funded and sponsored by the Californians Dedicated to Education Foundation, which is the CDE Foundation. It's an excellent organization. I was so impressed with their presentations, with their tools, with their published materials, their trainers. The entire environment was top rate. Our team had a fantastic experience. We definitely learned a lot. We'll be bringing back some wonderful tools that we'll be using as we build our plan. We did create a plan together. We've scheduled our meeting dates through the year. And I think it was a real great opportunity for us to connect in ways in which we haven't typically been able to do. We did go out for a full group team dinner on Tuesday night, which is really wonderful to do. And I think the board members know what it's like to sit out on a nice warm night in San Diego with the harbor lights and city lights shining down on you. So it was really positive experience. We're going to continue to remain involved in the California Labor Management Institute and potentially bring them here to do a one-day training for all of our school districts to participate in. And just a really great experience. Secondly, you may notice, maybe you didn't notice if you didn't come in the very front door, but the mural is progressing. And we have 2 dates in July where we will have students in the building to be painting. And I will get those dates out to the board. If any board member wants to come join students and pick up a paintbrush and add your piece of the wall. It's been a really also wonderful community building experience. I think everybody feels ownership of the piece. The Pedro, who is our artist, has just been wonderful working with all kinds of different students. And we're in the final quarter, I think, of the mural. So it would be great if you wanted to come be part of it all. There are dates in July, and I will get them out to you soon. And it is grand jury report season. So I did receive a grand jury report this week. I have not read it thoroughly, just really scanned it. It's about partnerships, community partnerships, and it's titled "Education is Everyone's Business." Don't know where they got that from. But many of the findings are pointed at SMCOE to do things. So I haven't really read it all, but what I can say is that it will fit right into our advocacy and partnership goal for the strategic plan. And so maybe these things will just dovetail and catapult forward. So I will be sharing that report with you, and then we have to do a response letter to the report by, I think, August sometime. And I will bring that forward at one of the board meetings to review the response. And then finally, just Tammy Moore, Associate Superintendent, will be celebrating her birthday on July 8th. And before that, I wish every one of you and your families a wonderful, safe, and relaxing 4th of July.
Thank you very much. And item 9A, board members will comment, and I will start with Ms. Alvaro.
Okay, thank you. Well, happy birthday to Ms. Moore. That's the same day as my son's birthday, so very, very good day. I just have 2 things quickly. I want to congratulate Gwen Lee on her promotion. I was really excited to see that. Has been so amazing in all the work that she does in the curriculum area that I'm really happy to see her continuing to move up the ranks with us because we need her. And then I just wanted to, it's kind of bittersweet. I wanted to congratulate Shelley Johnson on getting a new job closer to home in her child's school district. And I know how important that is to her and how far she's had to go. But I've worked with Shell a long time when she was just a mere teacher and watched her go through our PASC program and become credentialed and become our assistant principal and become our principal. And, I'm always, every step of the way, been really proud of her and thought she was incredible. And I will very, very much miss her. So yay, Shelley, and too bad for the rest of us. So that's all I have tonight.
Thank you. Mr. Torres?
Happy birthday. I know we have staff also coming, moving up or moving out, whether it's through retirement or other job opportunities. But thank you to everyone who's been doing a great job representing the county. Thank you.
Mr. Cannon?
Well, just to say, tag along about Shelley, gosh, what a good job she did. And we know how difficult that job is. Over the years, we've seen many, many challenges there, and she's certainly done a great job.
Mr. Camacho?
I don't have any additional comments. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Panini?
I'll apologize in advance because I have a few items, so I'll try to be brief. The first one, I thought you all would be interested to know, and I don't know if anyone else received this correspondence, but it was an invitation that I received from our former student board or student liaison, Allison Chan, to join a conversation. So she is, I wrote down what her position is.
She's amazing. is
She's
the word you're
amazing.
looking
That's
for.
number one. She's the program director for, and she's at UCLA, as I think most of us know, for the Student Board Member Association. So they're putting together a conference, which is called START, Student Trustee Advocacy Readiness Training. And this conference is, I don't even have the date here, but anyways, they were trying to get input from a wide range of people, and they held different sessions on different components of the conference, just like really, really thoughtful in terms of how they were doing this as students. And they were from all over the country, because there's also a national
Mhm.
center for, or a National Student Board Member Association. So they're the local one. And so that was just quite an experience. And I went to one of the sessions. So I just wanted to share that, because I know we like to follow and know.
I forgot
what
to
our-
mention that. I
Did
was
you?
part of that conversation
Yeah.
with Ally also.
I wondered. So anyway, I figured I wasn't maybe the only one. So that's number one. Number two is just briefly, I did go to the JJDPC meeting last night, and Susan Swope, who is on the JJDPC, is also on the grand jury. So she gave a summary of the grand jury report. And I think she said, oh, she sunsets off the grand jury on the 30th. So they were wishing her well. I don't know how long that service is, but I know it's a lot of time. And the focus that she really, and I'm sure we'll hear a lot more about it, but it was around CTE actually, and around how we need to make it easier. And we've been saying this for years, but make it easier for people to get into teaching in this area, and the areas that are, hard to find teachers. And it was maybe some local action, but really like also credentialing, things like that. So it sounded really interesting. So I look forward to hearing more about that. Third thing is that there was a report at that meeting as well from Paul Bocanegra and Johanna Rasmussen around the issue around Samtrans that we heard about months ago and then brought here for some discussion. And apparently, so Paul Bocanegra is co-founder of a nonprofit called Re-Evolution, and they do a lot of work in the communities actually throughout California. And they are spearheading, well, they wanted to address this issue of being able to get families and students to the YSC and to the different places. And so they announced that they, in fact, were going to be doing it through the nonprofit, and that the Office of Supervisor Noelia Corzo dedicated $10,000 to the effort. So they are kind of streamlining it through whatever agencies might have contact with the students, with the families. And so they're offering also to do presentations so that everyone understands. So I thought that might be, I don't know if you already knew about that, but might be at least good for staff, if not for the board. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll definitely want to learn about that.
Yeah, and how-
Every other avenue has failed. It's been a tough row.
Yeah, Johanna Rasmussen is literally organizing it. And so all the requests will go through her, and it's using our, Uber and Lyft and other transport, but they really, they're doing it. So that's great. Okay. The next thing is that I anticipate, I'm looking forward to the conversation around Gateway at the next meeting. And in anticipation of that meeting, I'm again renewing my request to President Gerard to form an ad hoc committee of our board, maybe on the agenda perhaps at the next meeting, so that we can stay apprised of what's going on, so we can be involved in knowing, so that we're prepared when it comes back to us again. We know that what's coming to us in July is rescinding the closing date. And then there will be further discussions. I know we'll hear more, but that we want to, be involved in that. So we're prepared to make that decision. And then finally, I just want to not belabor the conflict of interest issue and the ongoing investigation that is going on. I think that it is important for the board to understand that. I know that we've been told we will be kept apprised of what is going on, or we haven't been told that actually. We've been told that we will be told what happens at the end. But I do want us to maybe review our policies a bit and look at if something, so I don't want to say too much, but if something is sent to the county office under the purview of it's sent to the board's executive secretary, that is a correspondence that the board should know about. And so I'm saying that publicly because I learned of a correspondence that came to the board secretary yesterday from the investigator at the FPPC who contacted me. And so I was very surprised to know that President Gerard hadn't heard about it. I understand that it is a sensitive matter. The board raised this sensitive matter in February. The board is integrally involved in this issue. And so I expect that if a communication comes to our executive secretary or to Jennifer Perna, that we would receive a copy. And so I needed to say that publicly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I would agree with that, Ms. Benini, as a follow-up, 100%. I did attend a special meeting of the CCBE Board of Directors on Monday. And at that time, the CCBE organization did accept the resignation of President Gina Kulis. And it is effective June 30th. And John
McPherson.
Thank you. It just went out of my head. McPherson will be taking over as president of CCBE as of July 1st. So I did want you to know that. I'm looking forward to our graduation on Friday. They are always so special. And our students are so special, and everyone works so hard to get them to that position of graduation. So it really is a village, and the students all understand that as well, which I think makes it even more special. And I want to wish happy birthday to Tammy, and congratulations to our promotion people, the people that are moving on to new jobs and people that have been promoted within. That's also very exciting. And I also want to thank again, our San Mateo County Office of Education team for the excellent work and reports that you put together for us, because I know we want a lot of information. And but it's important for us as board members to have this information, not only for ourselves, but for our constituents out there that ask us questions all the time too. And we don't like to say, gee, I don't have any idea. So thank you for all you do. I really appreciate it. And with that, the next meeting of the San Mateo County of a board will take place on Wednesday, July 19th, 2023 at 7 p.m., which sounds like a long ways away. And with that, this meeting is adjourned.